We had a Panic Bowl on Sunday. The Panic Bowl was at Arrowhead Stadium. It was the Ravens and the Chiefs. And I think that this is pretty fair to say, even about the Chiefs, who obviously would be the team least inclined to panic out of any team in the NFL. That was a Panic Bowl. That is two excellent teams, or teams that we came into this year thinking of as probably being excellent. Two teams with excellent quarterbacks, right? With multiple time MVPs at quarterback, both of whom went into that game with a 1-2 record. Like, this was kind of, sort of must win. Now, I would contend that actually going into the game, it was a bit more of a must win for the Chiefs than it was a must win for the Ravens. The reason I would say that it was more of a must win for the Chiefs than it was for the Ravens is that the Chiefs are in a very good division, right? I think I would stop short of saying excellent because the Raiders, right? But they are in a very good division. The Ravens, I mean, are you really believing in the Steelers right now? Like, are we sure about the Steelers? Are we positive about the Steelers? Because I'm not positive about the Steelers, right? Then after that, it's the Bengals, who, we had real questions about them, and that was before Joe Burrow got hurt. And then it's the Cleveland Browns, who, man, wow. I didn't realize, Ryan, just how bad the Saints and the Titans were until I realized how much worse their point differential was than the Browns.
Still throwing out Joe Flacco.
They are still throwing out Joe Flacco. What's so funny about them is if you don't root for them, it really doesn't matter at all who plays quarterback for them. Like, none of that is going to change the end result. And by the way, since the last time we talked about Shador on the show, is that when he said the thing about he be watching the league and seeing half of them cats and knowing that he can play? And it's just like, stop talking. Don't do that.
He handled before this process so well, and and wants to see it. And watching Joe Flacco is breaking.
Yeah, but also, to be fair to him, and I think this is a very important point, I too think that I can do that. Like, at least Shador was nice enough to say that he was looking at the rest of the league.
Correct, not his own locker room.
He wasn't talking about, when he watches the rest of the league, when he watches film of the Browns. Yes, the rest of the league is also in these games, but directly in front of him is Joe Flacco, because I guarantee you this, Dylan Gabriel's mama is telling everybody that her son can play right now in those games. I guess Kenny Pickett don't play for them no more, but he looking at Joe Flacco like, I don't really understand why I'm over here behind Geno, who was cheeks in this last game. But anyway, back to the Ravens, who also were looking cheeks. Point differential is a thing that I think really matters the farther along you go in the season. Like, I think really at the midpoint of a season, it matters the most in terms of being a measure of how good your team is. It starts mattering a bit less at the end of the season, and I only say that then because the injury situation starts flipping up and more teams got more people banged up, and the team that you have at the end of the year becomes less reflective of the team that you've had through the duration of the sample over which you collect the point differential, right? You see what I mean? Like, what the team is in weeks, call it 12, is better connected to that total in many cases than what the team is in week 17, because the team that has week 17 got a lot more people in traction and shit, right? But the Ravens right now have a point differential of -2. That's not bad. That's kind of crazy for a team that is 1-3. This game against the Chiefs, they got smacked. Those other two losses obviously were close ones. And also, to be fair to them, the three teams that they've lost to are probably fairly good, right? We still don't know how good the Chiefs are, though credit to them on this. Number one, they looked like they had the confidence and they were going long. Anyway, I guess we saw this in some previous games too, but they are going for chunks. It's not just the nickel and dime show that it often feels like. They're clearly trying. Mahomes hasn't been as good on the deep ball as you like, but they're going for chunks. And two, and I think this part is important, Tyquan Thornton whose name at this point in my old ass life sounds like he could be one of several wide receivers and defensive backs in the NFL. I don't know where he went to college. I don't know many particular details about him. I will look them up as we speak. However, he appears to be good. And he appears to be good in a way that I think for the rest of the season for the Chiefs. Worthy came back, and that, for me at least, is as good as I feel like I've seen Xavier Worthy look in the NFL, right? So he's back. Thornton is able to go long and do those things. And then at some point, Rashee Rice is going to be back. At which point, just throwing this out there, they could be kind of terrifying. Holy smokes. Did you know, Ryan, that Tyquan Thornton ran a 4.21 unofficial 40 at the Combine in 2022?
I did not. I just remembered that he went to Baylor. So he's very one of those.
I'm going to tell you this. That boy went to Baylor, and he is from Miami. And I am saying that to say to you, there's a story. I don't know what exactly that story is, but for the two of those two entities to come together with all those miles in between them.
Yeah, the Miami to Waco pipeline isn't exactly.
Not strong. There's a, There's a story there. But anyway, that boy can burn. It appears that maybe he's been good all along and we just didn't know it because he had been playing for the modern incarnation of the New England Patriots. Just throwing it out there. But the Chiefs may be better than it appeared. They could be a team that is putting it all together. Meanwhile, back to the Ravens. I threw out the point about point differential to kind of undercut the point somewhat when talking about the Ravens. It matters, but the question about them is why y'all stay losing this game? And why do y'all stay looking like this when you lose this game? My buddy Nick makes this point, and I think his inclination can be to point more toward Lamar than is mine. But I do think the first place we look is the guy whose job Lamar saved 7 years ago. And it's Harbaugh. Because it's not just Lamar. Now, look, fairness to the Ravens also. That defense is looking like Afghanistan. You know what I'm saying? Bombed out and depleted. They are down, not just guys, but like good players. Like they've got issues on defense that aren't really anybody's fault. They also may have some issues that are people's fault, like what exactly our man Zach Orr is over there doing, right? But too often in games of this consequence or against teams of this quality who are not the Cincinnati Bengals, whose asses they consistently whoop, it looks a lot like this. Or it gets to the end and then it gets back to looking like this. And to me, the answer to that question is probably you need to go talk to the coach and see what is going on in that situation. I will tell you another funny story with my buddy Nick. There were two games that were on yesterday. We'll talk more about one of them later, but it was the Eagles and the Bucks for the day slate, and the Ravens and the Chiefs were in the 4 o'clock joint. And I decided to myself that was not a good day to go to Nick's house to watch football. Number one, he's heavily invested in Baker Mayfield, and Baker Mayfield went to Oklahoma. So, I don't really be getting down with that. And I'm still not sold. But anyway, then it was the Ravens and the Chiefs. And I had a realization when the Ravens played the Detroit Lions on Monday night. And in case you're curious, the Detroit Lions have the highest point differential in the NFL. Did you note that? Anyway, I'm watching the game and I realized that I had, gotten back to this game of being a fan. And it's kind of new to me, right? Because I had, divorced myself after I got myself off that Atlanta Falcon narcotic. So I hadn't been a fan in a long time. And I looked up and I realized that being a fan then required me to do something that I generally ain't about doing. I generally kind of prefer not to do. And in fact, what I absolutely don't do, which is I was in a position where I had to root against Lamar Jackson. I just don't like doing that. I don't at all. But what I really wasn't feeling like, even with one of my very good friends, I can't be over there sitting next to this white man that is vehemently rooting against Lamar Jackson. And look. You got to understand something. We're talking about Nick here. My brother didn't know that Nick was white until sometime in the year 2018. And when I told him, he didn't believe it. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of y'all be out here extending invites to the cookout. You sound ridiculous. But in this particular case, shit, the cookout might be at Nick's house. So I don't want y'all to think that I'm casting any aspersions upon him with what I'm saying. Because, no, I ain't worried about that at all when it comes to Nick. He's just a really big fan of the Kansas City Chiefs. But especially now that he got that long hair, I just couldn't be sitting next to this white man viciously rooting against Lamar Jackson. Like, I ain't that far in my journey. It don't feel right. Like, me and Dominique talk about this all the time. We got enough black quarterbacks now that I ain't got to ride for all of them, right? We ain't got to do that. Shout out to you, Tony Banks. My pops still like you. You know what I'm saying? But we ain't got to live like that no more. But that wasn't gonna feel right. I couldn't be in that place, right? And it'd have been extra bad because Lamar was out there doing exactly what Nick be saying he do. Allegations were not being beaten, right? Like it's all there for them. And what is troubling, would be troubling to me if I were a Ravens fan. I am not a Ravens fan, just to be clear. I'm just not in the business of rooting against Lamar Jackson. I ain't even got to root for him all the time. But I can't be rooting for his. Like, no. That's what me and L was talking about last show. He be needing us. But anyway, I don't know what the Ravens can do in the course of the season that will alleviate the skepticism that I think that they have earned about the vaunted games that matter place, right? And I try to be careful about talking about, oh, they can't win big games. Because what happens when somebody says that you can't win big games is that the games that you win, by definition, then can't be big. So again, for example, we don't say that Joe Burrow can't win big games, but Joe Burrow can't win games against Lamar Jackson, using those terms in the way that y'all dumbasses be using them, like quarterbacks or whole teams, right? We don't say that about Burrow. Now, in part, obviously, it's because he went to a Super Bowl. But we pick and choose which of the big games matter. College football, James Franklin is the one who is dealing with that. Like, I feel like James Franklin has gotten them boys to a Rose Bowl and won a Big Ten championship. I feel like that probably involved winning a big game. But he done lost enough of the other ones that you just the guy that can't win big games, right? Now, with Franklin, in the ones that I've watched at least, I don't see a great through line as to what happens or how it goes. With the Ravens, the through line seems pretty simple, man. They seem to go out there tight. Like, they seem to go out there shook up playing these games, which is on one level wild because so many of their good players have been in the league so long at this point. But I also think, like, Ray Lewis does not play for this team. Ed Reed does not play for this team. Terrell Suggs does not play for this team. Peter Bullwood does not play for this team. The point that I'm making when I say that, because obviously they're all old. They don't play for this team. But this isn't a collection of dudes that have been there before. It's just not. They get some guys that have been there at different points, like Kyle Van Noy, for example. But this isn't a bunch of guys who have done this before. I don't know what it is about them. I don't know if it really is directly to blame on the coach. That's just the place to look. But 1-3 for them doesn't feel like the season's over. Just because of how close a lot of these games have been. It doesn't feel like the season's over. They're going to have the best player on the field probably for the rest of the games they play this season. It doesn't feel like the season's over. The question is whether or not it matters if the season's over. If when you got a, win this or the season's over game, and there's not just a distinct possibility, but a likelihood, preponderance of evidence perhaps, that this is the way that you're going to wind up showing up, right? And again, this against a team that be handing your ass to you every time y'all play against them. Y'all ain't even look salty about it, right? That's the stuff that's easy for me to say from a distance. I fully understand. Forgive me if I'm being that guy. What guy? That guy. What guy? That guy. Forgive me if I'm doing that. But it can't keep being like that for them. On the other side, if the Chiefs can string a couple of these together, everybody in the AFC is going to be shook. And we're going to be back to thinking that they're the team that's going to win the conference and the division, a division that would be their 10th straight. It's just a little bit crazy.